we have an economy that really, the whole thing is a bubble. We gotta let the air out of this bubble, but nobody wants to do that. In fact, anytime the air starts coming out on its own, they try to blow it back in. That's what Trump is gonna try to do, right? Your choice is to keep doing that to avoid the day of reckoning, or actually deal with the problems, but then deal with the day of reckoning. But Trump did not run on any kind of austerity, tough love. We got to swallow the bitter tasting medicine and then we can have a real recovery. He just promised another sugar high. He's just promising all kinds of stuff that he can't deliver. He said, vote for me and I'll cut your taxes. I won't cut any government benefits like Social Security and Medicare. Social Security was a fraud from day one. We got to get rid of the whole thing. We got to get rid of the taxes, get rid of the sham, and just get the government out of something that it had no constitutional authority ever getting itself into. But no, they want to just keep it going.
Is there a scenario where within the next 4 years, he could get this country back on track to avoid a financial collapse?
Not a scenario that has any reasonable probability of playing out. I think that this term is going to be more of the same. There is no pain-free way to fix the problem. This thing is going to come crashing down. The question is, how much longer is it going to take?
Peter, welcome back to our show.
Thanks, Todd, for having me on again. Hope you're doing well.
Well, you're one of my favorite go-to people to assess the current U.S. economy and the financial markets, including the housing market. And we've spoken many times about the U.S. Heading in the wrong direction and the potential for a major collapse. Yeah. And Peter, the last time we spoke, it was prior to the presidential election. A lot has gone on. And so today I'm hoping that we can discuss maybe some scenarios where the U.S. could experience a new awakening. Maybe we could see a country getting back to a system of free enterprise and prosperity. And that maybe once again, we could create some healthy competition amongst corporations, resulting in lower prices for better made products and healthier food. Creating, I know one of the things Trump has talked about is creating new onshore jobs that provides opportunities for financial prosperity within the lower and the middle class Americans. And I know I've heard some of your podcasts recently, and you're not exactly as optimistic as I would like to think, about the next 4 years or maybe ever until we see some kind of a collapse. But I'd like to just ask you, were you surprised that Trump won?
No, I wasn't surprised. I had been predicting it for a long time. And the reason that he won is because I said the economy was bad. And the media's reports of this booming economy, the Fed, Wall Street, trying to get people to believe that we had a strong economy, that Bidenomics was working. I knew that wouldn't resonate with the people who are actually living in the economy. And so Trump tapped into that vein the same way he did in 2016 when he ran, when it was the same dynamic, when you had, the Biden administration, the Obama administration, they were trying to pretend that the economy was good then, and they were trying to get us to, install Hillary Clinton to continue the great economy under Obama. And I knew that was also a fiction, and Trump spoke to that and pointed out the fake government statistics and how it didn't really tell the truth. And, America wasn't strong, and he would make it strong. He would make it great. He would drain the swamp, and he would do all this stuff. And it was basically the same campaign again, only I think it may have worked a little better this time, given how much worse things had gotten since he left office. But I think Trump takes credit for a great economy that he claims to have presided over, which did not exist. I think that, the economy got worse during the 4 years of Trump. It just got even worse more during the 4 years of Harris. But a lot of that was started in the final year of Trump with all the mistakes that he made with COVID. But even before COVID, he was, running up government spending. The deficits rose about 12.5% during his first 3 years. The government spending rose 12.5%. Deficits rose 50%. And then, of course, it blew off the charts with COVID. But I think that this term is going to be more of the same. The deficits, I think, are going to increase even more, even though they're much larger. He's inheriting a annual deficit over 2 trillion, as opposed to the 650 billion he inherited in 2016. But I think the tax cuts that he's promising are even bigger than the ones that he delivered 4 years ago. So the impact on the budget could be greater. And I don't see the spending cuts. In fact, I see spending increasing under Trump, despite Elon Musk wanting to go to work cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. The problem isn't the waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, that's par for the course with government. I mean, it's never going to be efficient. The problem is, all the things that they've taken off the table that you can't cut, that need to be cut, that aren't going to be touched, that are just going to be growing on autopilot, that are a big problem. The tariffs aren't the solution. We've already got tariffs. Trump put tariffs in the first time. Most of them are still here. The trade deficits are bigger than ever. They got bigger under Trump's first term, and they got even bigger under Biden's. The last trade deficit we reported, merchandise trade, was the worst ever, with the exception of one single month as soon as they reopened the economy after COVID, when a lot of backed up inventory shipped in 1 month. But if you look at regular months, the last one was the worst, and that's with the tariffs. So more tariffs are just going to drive prices higher. They're not going to improve our industrial base or lower our trade deficit.
I've heard a lot of people say a lot of different things about the election results. They said that, I've heard racism is still running rampant in the U.S., that's why they elected Trump. I've heard people say that they weren't ready, like with Hillary Clinton, that they weren't ready for a woman to be president. I mean, what do you think? I mean, obviously, the economy has been horrible over the last 4 years. What do you think the number one reason why voters, I mean, obviously it had to have been an enormous amount of Democrats that voted for Trump, a lot of young people. What do you believe, if you had to say one single issue being the greatest, do you think that is the economy, or what do you think?
I mean, we don't have to guess. The voters told people with the exit polls, why they voted the way they did, what were their main concerns, and it was the economy or inflation, which is, part of the economy. But yes, government created inflation, drove prices way up, and people struggled to pay the bills. They depleted their savings. They maxed out their credit cards. They got second jobs. They got third jobs. It's been very difficult. And so Trump promised some relief. I feel your pain. I'm going to make it better. I'm going to cut your taxes. He didn't really alienate anybody because he didn't promise to cut any benefits. We're not going to cut Social Security. We're not going to cut Medicare. We're not going to touch Obamacare. Right. So he didn't gore any sacred cows. And then he pandered to everybody, in particular, Bitcoin. I think one of the reasons that he got a lot more young people was because those are the young people that own Bitcoin. And Trump promised to make them rich if he was elected. So I think that helped. I think racism played a very small part in it, not enough to move the needle. I mean, there obviously are racists in America of all races, so there are people that probably voted for Kamala because she's black, right? That's racism. Or they voted for Kamala because she's a woman. Right? There are women that I heard people saying, it's time for a woman president. Right? Well, all right. Well, isn't that sexist? Who said it's time for a woman president? It's time for a good president. Doesn't matter what their gender is, what their race is. But I know there are people who voted for Harris because she was a woman and because she was black. And there are probably people who didn't vote for her because she was a woman or because she was black. But I'm sure that those people are actually a smaller number. I think that the racism and sexism probably worked to Kamala's advantage rather than to her disadvantage. But the biggest disadvantage she had was she was dragging the last 4 years of dead weight behind her, from the Biden administration. They asked her, what would you do different? She couldn't think of a thing. Yet then she said, well, but, vote for me for a change. Well, change what? You didn't do anything different than she ran a horrible campaign, too. Her whole campaign was basically Donald Trump's a fascist, so vote for me. He's the next Adolf Hitler. So, I mean, how do you run a campaign where it's all just negative about your opponent, nothing really positive about yourself? It was really voting for Trump or voting against Trump. I mean, Harris maybe wasn't even in the race. It was just the yay or nay on do you want Trump or not?
Do you think they kept her, as the candidate because of the campaign funding that they had raised? They had
Well,
gotten too
they
far
got
down the
to
road?
spend that money. That was probably a big part of it, because if she wasn't on the ticket, I think they were going to have to give that money back. But, they raised a lot more money, but then they blew through it. I mean, if you look at these expenditures, somebody ought to audit the whole campaign. It looks like a giant fraud. So many people paid money to support her, and it was like a big slush fund. Because I don't know that they weren't, maybe spending the money to win the campaign. They were just trying to milk it for whatever they could. And she still ended up with debt, right? She ended up with a negative balance. But look, Trump, I mean, look, he took a lot of money from people who thought and they would make money if Trump became president. I mean, a lot of special interest money went into the Trump campaign. I mean, in particular, the crypto money. I mean, they were the biggest donors. And I think that was really the low point, in my opinion, of the Trump campaign. To hear him, because I know Trump doesn't believe any of this. I mean, when he was president, he was, it's a fraud, it's a scam. Bitcoin's not a currency. It has no value. It gets its value from thin air. And he had nothing but negative things to say about it until he wanted to get their votes and their campaign donations. And then he completely flip-flopped, and Bitcoin is great. I want to make America the Bitcoin capital of the world. We should make all the Bitcoin here. We should have a Bitcoin reserve. I mean, that was exactly what the Bitcoin community wanted to hear. And they responded with their donations and their votes. And now they think they're getting rewarded because, Bitcoin prices hit 90,000 last night for Bitcoin. And, MicroStrategy keeps going up and borrowing billions more and buying more Bitcoin with borrowed money, and then pushing up the price of Bitcoin. So the price of their stock goes up so they can borrow more money to buy more Bitcoin and just keep the pyramid going. But this thing is going to come crashing down. Question is, how much longer is it going to take?
Interesting. Well, he ran a brilliant campaign. I mean, and to your point, he spoke at the, I think it was a keynote at one of the nights at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville this year.
Yeah.
Is there a scenario, Peter, that you could see? I have some I want to play out with you as we unpack this thing. But is there a scenario where he could make policy change, whether it was an executive order, he gets it to pass through? Is there a scenario where within the next 4 years, he could get this country back on track to avoid a financial collapse?
Well, not a scenario that has any reasonable probability of playing out, because, there is no, pain-free way to fix the problem, right? The problems have been building up for not just years, but decades, really. But we have an economy that really is a bubble. The whole economy. It's built on the reserve status of the dollar, where we don't have to produce. We just print money. We ship the money abroad, and we get $1 trillion plus worth of goods that we didn't produce, and we didn't have to expend any resources making. And so we bring all this stuff in, and we get to consume it, and we get to borrow money we didn't save, and we live beyond our means. And the government gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the industrial base gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so you're building this, like upside down pyramid. And, everybody just spends too much, borrows too much, saves too little. We don't invest enough. We don't produce enough. And it's just kind of a really mixed up economy. And every time over the years, we've tried to go through this, a deflation or a correction where we bring real estate prices down, housing prices down, and we get some kind of recession or crisis. The government just, prints more money, artificially lowers more interest rates to get the bubble to get bigger and bigger. And so your choice is to keep doing that to avoid the day of reckoning, or actually deal with the problems, but then deal with the day of reckoning.